if I look at the course of my history, the hardest part has been being okay, not being okay. It's like, hey, I'm just not at my best today. But that particular, statement has a lot to do with accepting where I'm at, accepting myself, accepting my limits, accepting that I'm human, accepting that, I'm going through stuff just like everyone else is going through stuff. And I'm not here to be some sort of guru. I'm here to help you through yours. That process alone of, can you recognize that you're not okay, is an incredible position of permission. I'm going to give myself permission not to be at my best right here and not feel like I'm not enough and not feel like this is going to end the relationship that we have in a coaching container. It's not going to be the end of the business. It's not going to be the end of my world. It's okay. Okay. No plan. Straight winging it. King of the wing. Let's do this.
Isn't that what we normally do?
No, we always have a plan, and everyone listening knows it. It is good to kind of reflect a little bit on what was happening with Nako and.
Oh, that means I get to ask the first question.
Carry on.
What was it like?
It was miserable. It was awful. It was just all bad all the way around. No, it was really cool to be able to ask questions like that to someone I've sort of known from a distance, right? You don't really know them, but you know their music.
Yeah.
Which is definitely different. But I think that to have the opportunity to do that is certainly really special, really significant. It speaks a lot to like momentum in my world, to have a moment where you're face to face and it sounds like when he's here in November, like there might be a chance to like give this guy a hug or a high five or a handshake. So to go from like hear about it, dive in and explore musically, then like follow along and learn about and then meet is a really cool journey. He actually has a song about that. Like,
about you?
Definitely not. But there's a song about.
I love ballad.
I don't know what song it's called. I can't remember the name, but it's him and another artist, and they're talking about like it went from a dream to a paper to a vision to here and to reality. And there is something really cool about that. And
because there's also I've learned that it's risky meeting someone like him because you have an idea of what this person is.
For sure.
And is this person going to live up to the expectation that I have of who he is based on, you've never met the guy before. It's solely based on music.
Yeah. They say never meet your heroes.
Right. Because you never know what you're going to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the problem with putting someone on that kind of pedestal, and I don't think I put him on any pedestal, but
he wouldn't want that anyway.
He would definitely not.
No.
But the problem with putting someone up there is you put them up there with no flaws. And then when you meet them, they're human and they have flaws and they have, things that are not squeaky clean about them, like all of us do.
Yeah.
And then it dismantles the pedestal.
When you say we do that with all of our relationships, when we first get in, we don't want anyone to kind of see everything about us. So we kind of create this image of who we are.
Fair,
so it's not much different.
Yeah. Like I think about, the working world today and how this whole thing of like quiet quitting took off and, remote work has been challenging for many companies to figure out. And how do you build culture if you're always remote? And, if you're hiring somebody, like, dude, it's a total charade, just like dating. It can be a total charade. It can be. It isn't by definition.
But you never know who you're getting.
Yeah, it can be. So like you can look polished and you can look clear and you can look clean. You can speak well, communicate authentically. And then all of a sudden you're just like, what the heck happened? Like you're not even showing up anymore for work.
But he very much, although I think his voice when he sings sounds different than when he's speaking.
Very.
Like that. There's not a, like the person that you hear in the music is the person that also showed up when you were doing the conversation with him last week.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, and like it was a lot of fun to just kind of understand him. It probably is different for different genres, right? Like in a way, I think the more grounded you are, probably the more grounded your music is over time.
Correct. Yeah.
Like you still got to sell tickets and like get the show there. Like,
well, and knowing his history, he more than likely is a grounded person because of
everything
the
he's
pain
been
that
through.
he has
Yeah.
gone through.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was a lot of fun to do. It was a lot of fun to sit and poke questions. And, I also think he did a great job of entertaining like a little bit of the context so that it wasn't just like question.
Yes.
So it was fun for me to share some of my story and thread. And look, at the end of the day, like the whole point of that is
He was also about as human as you get as he ate his strawberries
and just
throughout the whole episode.
chilling and having good food. Well, the thing I in hindsight appreciate also is that the conversation we had is one that immediately afterwards I went into like, man, I could have done this better or this better or this better.
Right,
like always, right? Because your time is limited and you're trying to, like, the way I see it is a person is like painting a spectrum, like in just a 3-sentence answer. And you're kind of looking at this thing like, okay, what thread do I pull down from this? Like, nobody talks about this in podcast land, because when someone does like a 3, 4, 5 minute answer to a question and you're trying to loop to the next thing, you're only able to take like a small piece of that.
Yeah, and you think about it, you could really, with him in particular, you could take one experience that he's had and do an entire podcast on one experience, just based on what he has gone through.
Yeah.
And to try to kind of give a larger context is difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, it was cool to have like a little bit of selfishness of like, these are things that I would want to know. Just because his music has connected with me in a way that many musicians cannot, because of what he speaks to and some of the hurt that he's been through and some of the pain that he's walked through. But also to make it valuable for somebody not knowing him, not knowing his background, where, this is a guy that musically has been very successful, tours across the planet.
I think he mentioned on the podcast, he just had the largest crowd ever.
Yeah.
While he was in Australia.
I think it was the largest in Australia. Because he's been to Australia many times to play. I could be mistaken with that, but I think it was the largest just in Australia. But 7-figure entrepreneur, like, built this business, made the like illustrious million, and still had to run a business. Like, just because you make $1 million doesn't mean you keep $1 million. So shared a little bit about that and that journey, and I think it was a very human success story outside of the box of an entrepreneur that's built a business in a more defined, traditional maybe.
What was biggest takeaway?
Biggest takeaway.
Eventually, I'll let you ask questions, but for now, I'll ask them.
I'd say biggest takeaway was, as an artist, having like his answer to the question, how do you keep expanding your vision? And him just being like, I don't.
I've told that story a couple of times already since then.
but I think it was great because what he then talked about, like, he didn't just leave it at like, I don't. I just like ride the wave. It was like, no, I actually have figured out what makes me feel connected enough to then let the vision unfold.
Right.
So there's a lot of wisdom in that.
Yeah.
Because look,
well, he's not, and we work with enough people where how do you get them not to force something that isn't there? He doesn't force it.
Nor is he aimless.
Right.
And to find the balance of that is the balance between science and art.
Yeah.
Like, what I think if we look at what we do with clients, especially the really high level ones, what we're essentially doing is like, we're anchoring a vision and then building the like process. And if I extracted anything from it, it was like, this is important. This is everything. The process is everything. So it aligns very much philosophically with what I believe. Like, find your process, find what makes you happy, find a way of life, more or less, find a way of life.
And for him, it's a very simple way of life.
Yeah. Well, I think for all of us,
growing his own food. I mean, he probably, if you had to find the kind of stereotypical entertainer out there, he would not be that person.
Yeah. I'd say to the kind of simplicity he has. Yeah. I think that all of us want a simple way of life. Like, we all want something that's just like, chop, 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 chop. Here's my way of life.
Well, I think he made the point at one point that There was all, I think I had told you this as well. There was so much chaos in this guy's life growing, at least early on in his life. You can almost understand why that, like, a value would then be simplicity in
For sure.
a sense.
Yeah.
Because how, like, he's had to live through so much chaos.
So much. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would attest that everyone wants a simple way of life. That doesn't mean that everything is simple,
Right.
but a simple way of life, meaning that, like, look, I'm clear. I know what I want. I know who I am, and I'm going for like this. And this is really the first time in my life where I've ever had like such a simple business route, a simple personal route, a simple like routine. Like I'm not chasing like I was before. And I'm not after all this stuff like I was before. Like there's still stuff that I aspire to and that I want, and then I'm pulling towards and working towards. But there isn't the distraction of complexity the way there used to be. And that has been forged through fire. But I appreciated, to go back to the original question, like I appreciated that his like way of describing that was basically like, this is the way that I live. And if you mess with that, I'm just going to say no. And there's something about that I've really been working on myself. So it was kind of a cool experience of, this is not the music that we're connecting on now. Now it's person to person.
Well, you spoke very little about the music, even though he's an entertainer.
Yeah.
And a musician.
Yeah. I like, in a weird way, I can see us being friends because there's connective tissue that's bigger than just, I like your music. And that wasn't the purpose in the first place. Like,
correct.
Yeah, I do like your music.
Yeah.
But what I recognize is that our patterns behind the music are probably very similar.
Well, and I think I've heard you mention that even the trajectory of his music in many ways speaks to the trajectory of your own life.
Mm-hmm.
As it is for his, obviously, because that's how the music unfolds. But that the music is also a manifestation in some sense of your own journey.
It has. I was kind of typing a social post and sharing a little bit throughout the day because the podcast just dropped as we're recording this. So I was sharing that in many ways what his music did was it gave me words that I could not create myself. And I think musicians and artists take emotions and experiences and make them so understandable and so
like poetry.
It makes something very complex distilled. And his albums almost tracks to many of my experiences where I'm like, oh, yeah, that's what I've been trying to say.
You kind of had those aha moments. I've heard you. I mean, we've talked about it before.
I've also played the songs for you, right? Where I'm like, hey, this is, hey, I can't say it. So like, listen to this song.
I knew nothing about the guy until you introduced him to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that is the very exciting part about meeting someone like that. Whether there's a friendship or connection for forever or not, like just to be able to be like, bro, real talk. I've been going through some things in my life that I don't know how to explain or describe. And now I don't have to. And I'm just grateful that I can be like, listen to this song. And it encapsulates everything I've been experiencing for a year. And someone can be like, that's
right.
That's really great.
I'm thinking of some of those songs as we're talking. We're talking.
Some of those songs are wild too. Like, yeah, he's been through a lot. And it was really cool to just be able to level with that.
I mean, I'm still blown away by the story of him going to the prison to visit the guy who murdered his father.
Yeah, man.
His biological father.
Yeah. Yeah, the courage, to do that is certainly immense.
Against what his family wanted him to do as well.
Right. And really wasn't, I don't even know that he knew what it was for.
Yeah.
He just felt called to it.
Yes. I think he even mentioned that. There was just something in him that told him he should
got to go. Yeah, you got to go. Which that I also feel is an underrated nugget of wisdom. Like there have been many circumstances in the last like decade for me. And I'm coming up on 10 years outside of a job, which is kind of crazy because those 10 years have been the most volatile in American history.
Right.
Like it's crazy what's going on. And in that, you know, I'm starting to process a lot with some of the wins that we've had and some of the big things that we've been able to do. But many of those experiences I could not explain to anybody, and no one could understand either. Like I couldn't explain it and they didn't get it. And it just left us in this like, well, I guess Aaron's doing what Aaron's doing.
Yeah, because it's also happening on a deeper level than a lot of people live.
Yeah.
Like, and that music is very much has a lot of depth to it. It's dynamic, and it's like going to a movie. Like I could see the movie in and of itself on the screen, but there's always a story under the story that's taking place that the artist is trying to speak to within you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the good artist.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's great, man. It was cool to do. Some good stuff came up. Longest podcast we've done, you know, like, and the coolest sequence of a process. Like, what I think should certainly be noted is like, you made that happen. And I'm grateful for that. I'm excited for that for you. That like, I hope that gets in your head of like, so basically here's the story. And maybe you can fill in some of the gaps. But I'll tell it here because I'm way more prolific with the story anyway. Marty would be like, yeah, like I've reached out.
Yeah, I sent an email.
Yeah, like, no. So this artist had been in conversation for a long time. Songs, history, just like we're talking about here. We played his music at retreats. We played his music at events. It's been a big part of my life for the better part of 5 years. And I think in the last year and a half, especially with Get Out of Your Own Way, getting ready to celebrate a 2-year anniversary, the like importance and significance of it got higher and higher with me referencing Nako, Nako, Nako more and more and more. And like playing songs in the car ride and playing songs while we're on retreats and doing all this. So I think one day, Marty was like, it'd be really cool to get him on the podcast.
No. That's not the way it happened.
I didn't even get to the story yet.
I know, but that's not the way it happened.
How did it happen?
Well, go and tell the story and I'll fill it. Go ahead.
All right, you can fix it in just, well, let me get like at least
go ahead.
One story element in. So we were having a conversation, I believe, and it came up like, it'd be great to get him on the podcast.
You had mentioned that.
I mentioned that?
Yes.
But
and I said, I actually just emailed him.
You had already emailed him.
I had just done it.
Okay.
That was the intuitive piece of the whole thing that
Nice.
You mentioned it, and I literally had just emailed.
Nice. So Marty had emailed and said, you know, something to the effect of like, hey, we use your music in retreats and events and like all these things.
Mindful that I'm also emailing like info at, like just it like wasn't like
yes, an admin account.
Yes.
But in the process of that, like, you know, you go to Instagram, fill out the form, go to the website, like the whole trail, right? Sends just a pretty open-ended message. And
I think I had reached out to like 4 people at the same time, and they're the only one. Yeah,
podcast potential guests.
They were the only ones that responded as well.
But it was also a pretty fast response.
Like the same day.
Yeah, it was a pretty fast response. And we know this later. If you haven't listened to that episode, one of the coolest compliments he gave was like, when I heard the name of your show, I was immediately interested.
Yes. Yeah.
Like such a cool compliment.
Yeah.
And speaks to what the brand has essentially created.
Which is funny because normally you ask people that question. You didn't even have to ask him. He brought it up.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah. So this email goes out. He says like, cool. So we start jumping on calls and figuring some stuff out. Emails go back and forth. We work on scheduling and then there we are. But this all started from you sending a blind cold email to somebody that had significance in our world, particularly my world.
Correct.
And being intentional about it, but also I think what you can be very proud of is that not only was it initiated, but it was a very aligned, all the way top to bottom kind of conversation. It was a great conversation about art and music, and we talked about how, you know, as an entrepreneur or as an artist, like you're an entrepreneur and you got to think about business and all these things you learn the hard way. No one really teaches you that. So we got to talk about
and that was one of the first things he brought up on the call before the podcast.
Yeah,
he brought that up.
Yeah, and we got to talk about it on the podcast. So if you what I really wanted to get through, and I want to cover this with more artists, that like as a musician, you just sing. Like you can't do all the things, so you have to spread it out, which is different than entrepreneurship where you just take it all on. But it was good to break that down.
But I think he also spoke about the flow where he wore all the hats, then he didn't wear all the hats. Now he's back to wearing more hats. Like there's been an ebb and flow to it.
And the distinction of there's like in the artist and then there's in the entrepreneurship, right? Yeah. Like the hat wearing.
Yeah. And I had reached out not knowing any other than the music. I knew nothing about the guy. I had not read anything. I think I read the one little biography on the website. That was about it.
Yeah, which is short.
But we didn't know like everything that's gone on in this guy's life.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a line from, music to like our why, to it being very pure intentioned, to just have a really open conversation. It was a line from a space of like, of this human having a lot to say and offer that deep and profound.
While eating strawberries.
It was also deep. It was also a line from the idea that there's a lot behind this story that he has to share that we can do a good job of bringing out, because our podcast is not the simple, like, tell us about your best tour. It's different.
I don't know if he did it on the podcast or after, but he complimented you on the questions you asked. That you ask good questions.
It was cool to take it different. The guy that we just interviewed on Tuesday, can't tell you yet. Well, maybe we can. I don't know. But like he said the same thing. And I think I'm getting better at, how to do this, how to explore again that rainbow of like an answer, and then try to find the threads that are not commonly pulled on. And usually that has to do with really intentional listening to see what the message is, kind of like you're saying, underneath the movie versus just what.
Well, and I'll compliment myself. Like doing research beforehand as well helps.
It does help a lot.
And at least kind of gives you some of those angles going into it.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, it's a dance, and it's not always easy to find that rhythm, with a person. And, there's a lot that goes into it. But it's a lot of fun to get meaningful insights and answers from someone like him.
Now we can go any direction you want, but one other question is favorite song?
Dang. Well,
or maybe song that speaks to you most now.
So yeah, I think so his older albums were much more like organized around spirituality and the exploration of like being whole, which is also crazy from his story, because you kind of see him go away and then come back to that. So a song that stands out is "We Are on Time." That's one of the ones I referenced in the podcast.
It was it's the first thing you talked about.
It was the first song that I'd ever heard, and was like, oh my God, like this is so. It provided hope to something that felt hopeless. But I actually think a great one that is sort of more fitting to me now is the song called "Okay," and the whole song is like
you'll be okay. Is that
no? It's how does the chorus go? Like, I'm not okay, and I'm finally okay, not being okay.
Yeah.
And there's something about that, because I think the world of we'll just call it very directly, the world of giving advice assumes that I have answers, and assumes that we have answers, and assumes that like everything's perfect and everything is pristine and like porcelain. And maybe not everyone else thinks that, but I definitely have worked very hard to make my world great. And at the same time, there are pieces of my world and fabric that are challenging and still are very difficult. So if I look at the course of my history, the hardest part has been being okay, not being okay. It's like, hey, I'm just not at my best today.
Yeah.
Even if I'm sick, like I can show up to a call, and I think in the past I would have tried to tough it out. And now I'm just like, hey man, I just want you to know before we start today, like I'm operating on 70% capacity. I'm sick. I'm ill. I'm here for you. I'm going to give you my absolute best, but my best isn't my best. And I think what's been beautiful about
in 15 years, you'll say, I can't make it. I'm sick.
probably, hopefully less than that. I guess it depends on the level of sickness,
Right.
because I've definitely had to do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But that particular, statement has a lot to do with accepting where I'm at, accepting myself, accepting my limits, accepting that I'm human, accepting that, I'm going through stuff just like everyone else is going through stuff. And I'm not here to be some sort of guru. I'm here to help you through yours. And that process alone of, can you recognize that you're not okay, is an incredible position of permission. Like, I'm going to give myself permission not to be at my best right here, and not feel like I'm not enough, and not feel like this is going to end the relationship that we have in a coaching container. It's not going to be the end of the business. It's not going to be the end of my world. It's okay.
I mean, I've told you this story before. As I was getting ready to leave ministry, and I met with a therapist, because I think a lot of people live their life this way. I'm like, I don't know how much longer I could hold it all together. And I think it becomes about survival. I got to try to hold it all together. And because I tell myself, if it falls apart, I'm going to fall apart as well. But I think that comes, the only way you could finally let go is accept that not being okay is okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise you hold. I also feel like in like success land, there are two kinds of relationships. Maybe this is just my experience now. There's the person that pretends they're okay when they're clearly fucking not.
Yeah.
And there's a person that's like, yeah, man, like,
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yeah, I'm fine. How are you doing? Fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine. And then there's a person that's like,
just don't piss me off or I'm going to smash you.
Well, and then there's a person that's like, hey, here's what's going on that's difficult, and here's what I'm dealing with and struggling with, and here are the parts that are awesome. And you can just have a much better conversation with the latter than like the I'm fine person. And especially as a coach, like there's nothing like more red flag with a prospect, someone that's like, hey, like, I really want to get clear vision. I really want to get to the next level, and I really want to do it. I'm like, okay, where are you struggling? I'm not struggling. Like, everything, like, wait a minute, hold on, bro. Like, are you sure? Because you clearly want to get somewhere that you're not. Like, are you sure you're okay? Like, it's okay. Or if you're upset, if you're frustrated.
I don't need help with anything.
Yeah, I don't need help. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, when you can say that you're not okay, when you can say that you're struggling, when you can say that you're dealing with stuff, what you end up with is a window into someone to show up for them differently. So if you say that, I can show up for you differently. If I don't know that you're hurting, and I have no idea what to do or say. It walls off both parties. And, if you're around someone that also can't accept that you're not okay, you're like, I want to find that out early.
Yeah. Yeah. Get away from that.
Get away. It's like, if you can't be broken, if you can't be hurting, if you can't, and I'm not saying like, what I mean by that is not like you're in a weeping puddle on the floor. That's a very different place. What I'm saying is to be able to communicate like, hey, it's been a really difficult time, or I'm struggling with this, or I'm really grappling and I just don't know what to do. I'm really afraid, or there's like the emotional basket case where you're in the emotions.
Yeah.
I'm talking about talking about the emotions. If someone can't meet you there and listen to you there, I promise you, no matter what you think, they are not on your side. They are not on your team. If you can't stand when someone is going through that kind of stuff and just be with them in that and just let them not be okay, you're not okay. Like,
correct.
Something's going on with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Then you have to be mindful of what's yours, what's theirs, and all that kind of, especially if you're an empath. How did my notes aren't here, or I'd look it up. At the very end of the podcast, and I'm thinking of it as we're speaking here, he mentioned about I'm enough and
I can do better.
And I can do better. I'm thinking that as I listen to you speak about that song.
Yeah, I'm enough and I can do better.
Because I think we also have, he may have said it, the tendency to say, well, I accept where I'm at. And then, like, I don't have to do anything else because I've accepted. Well, I'm all right where I'm at. But there's still room for growth at that point.
Well, you're growing or you're decaying, right? That's just nature's law. That's not even like a personal development thing. That's just nature's law. You're growing or shrinking. It's one or the other.
Yeah.
And that could be a variety of facets, but I think the idea of, trust in your enoughness and hold in your enoughness and know that you are, and also get your fucking ass out there and get better. Like keep getting better. Keep getting better for bettering's sake, not for anybody else's sake, just like for betterment. And the idea of even like We Were on Time, and that song and that message giving me a lot of hope was basically like, I'm trying to get better, but it hasn't happened yet. I'm trying to get better, but it hasn't happened yet. I'm trying to get better, but it hasn't happened yet. And that song was like, dude, you're on time. Like,
Right.
Don't stop. Don't quit. Don't change what you're doing. Just know that you're on time. And I think those themes really go well together. The idea that you got to get better. You got to go. You got to work. You got to work hard. I don't believe in doing anything half-assed. Like, if you're going to do it, don't half-ass it. And mind that there's a process.
And I was thinking, because I actually just recorded a video similar on this today of whatever, if you think you're looking for something or that you're feeling like you're not enough, like you'll start to view everything through that lens. But one of the things I had in my experience in working in religion, people would often say, well, I'm praying for X. And I'm like, no, that's not a good prayer. Like, you're praying for the answer you want. That's not a prayer. That's trying to look through life through a particular lens that there's a pretty good chance you're never going to see that.
Yeah.
So how do you broaden what it is that broaden the question so that there's more openness to
find
how
the answer.
Correct.
Correct. Yeah, which I think is true with clients, right? It's like, I really want to be clear on a vision. This is the vision. Like, wait a minute, we got to ask way more questions before we get there.
Yeah.
And
don't make me lose this. This is it.
Yeah. Well, I think we're all pretty deeply afraid of like the answer being not what we have.
Correct.
Where, if I'm like, oh man, I really want to break to the next level, and I obviously am going to say that the next level is bigger than what I am. So like, I'm going to be a next level coach. I'm going to be a next level speaker, next level facilitator. But if I open to that, it might be totally different.
Correct.
And then I got to deal with that. And all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, man, I had no idea what I was getting into.
Correct. Which is all expectation at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much about like the idea that the next level looks the same as this one. And that's the problem. That's why we're here. That's what we do.
Then it's not next level.
It can't be. And
it is what it is now.
Yeah. That would be the level you're at now. When I just go back to that idea of like, your next level is so different than what you currently have. And there might be similarities. Like, doesn't mean you have to burn your business and start over. But if you've been building this thing for 10 years and you're miserable, the next level doesn't look like that. Like, why the fuck would it?
It better not.
Yeah. Why would it? Like, why would you want it to? Like, the next level should look like you work 6 hours a week.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, then what do I do? That's the question, not that. Right? The business might still be running. You still make $200,000 a year. It happens passively. You're there 6 hours a week. You're checking in. You're like the chairman of the board. And then you're out and you're doing something that...
Because then you're hung up on my identity is what I do.
Yeah. I also think you're hung up on like I want to fly, but I also want to keep my feet on the ground. I want the next level to feel familiar.
Yeah.
We also Nako also talked about trying, which I really appreciate.
That's right.
Like, you're going to have to try something new. You're going to have to try a new attempt, a new approach. You're going to have to try working less. You're going to have to try sitting still.
I was waiting for you to pull a Yoda on him when he said that about trying. Yoda's like, no try, just do or something.
Do or do not, there is no try. Yeah, I like that. I thought you meant like lightsaber slash.
Different movie. Yeah.
Well, the idea that the next level requires a lot of trying is important. His whole theme was like, I think the question was like, how do you know if it's right? He's like, you don't. You fucking try it. You try it. You try again.
We were on a call with clients just earlier today. It's essentially the same thing, right?
Don't want to try. I don't want to.
Afraid of failing, afraid of getting it wrong.
And interestingly, I think there's an equal balance of people who are afraid of failing and afraid of actually getting it right. And fears are rational on both sides. There's no reason not to try though. And I remember various different points of my life where I was trying new things so often that like when one finally stuck, it was like, oh man, I just got to say no to all the rest. And that kind of sucked. I can remember other seasons where it was like, nothing's working. I might as well just keep trying. And then finally one did stick and it was like, cool. Like I can get rid of all these ones that I'm sucking at, so that whole piece of trying and next level are really connected. I mean,
I still think some of it comes down to, can I trust myself?
Trying.
Yeah.
And next level. Yeah, I agree with that.
And I mean, you're really good at, there are other people that are good at just trying it. Just do it.
I appreciate that. I do feel like I'm really good at that.
But not everyone is. And I kind of wonder, like, do some just need the permission to literally to try something because they don't trust themselves enough to make that choice?
Well, there does it's a great position. I feel that what has created the most amount of try in my life is self-trust. It propels you to be like, all right, I've never offered a product this way. I've never offered it this level. I've never offered it this price point. I've never offered it in this methodology, like whatever.
Even in terms of pricing, like you've done it by trying.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks on the outside like you're fearless. I think it's an experiment, and you have to trust yourself through that for sure. What I think has made for a lot of success in my world, especially really early on, was the willingness to completely fall on my face. And that is
I've never known you to do that.
I always fall on my face. No, not always. I am
literally like off a skateboard.
Yeah, that I've fallen off my face on a skateboard. That is a literal example. Yes. Thank you for telling that to the world today. That's actually a very funny story.
Wait till I tell you that story.
Yeah, wait till that story.
Now I could tell everyone that's listening, I would tell the story very different than you do. And if your dad was here, he would tell it very different. And Gabe would tell it.
We should get that podcast happen. Like, yeah. Let's just tell this story.
Just about that one event.
Just to move across the country. Yeah, that'd be a crazy story.
Oh my God.
That would be wild.
Your father could just be like color commentary.
Yeah. Well, this idea of trying to like who I am today is also different than it was before. Like what changes is that when you're early on, if you're building a business, you can try and there's low risk because you haven't built a name for yourself. And I think this is where entrepreneurs get really hung up. When you start to perform at a high level, when you're making 7-8 figures, like you don't want to try because it might negate everything that you built. And it feels that way anyway. It isn't real, but it feels like, well, this all could go. So why would I try something new? It's working, right?
Yeah.
And, you sort of live in this like, well, it's not that bad. But I think in general, if you can consistently be trying something new, then you keep that muscle alive. I think it is literally just something that atrophies.
Yeah. And some are better than others.
Well, to me, it's a do or don't, right? It's like a Yoda thing, like try or don't try, like pick one.
Right.
But let's not pretend like you're trying when you're not, right? And that's our job as coaches, is to be like, hey, you keep saying that you're trying to build this business, or you're trying to start a nonprofit, or you're trying to write a book, or you're trying to, I don't know, you want to go speak in front of people, or, the next level for you involves philanthropy and,
I want to speak in front of people, but I won't do a little reel on Instagram.
On Instagram.
How are you going to go speak to people?
You want to go speak in front of 1,000 people, but you don't want to, push the red button on Instagram. Yeah, I agree. And also the whole thing of like, I just want to skip and bypass And I want to try it up here. I don't want to try it down here.
Yeah,
I want to try it at the top, not at the bottom. So, if you're learning to snowboard.
So I'm starting a coaching business. Well, why can't I be like Tony Robbins?
Right.
Well, Tony Robbins just didn't become Tony Robbins.
Dude, that guy started when he was like 30.
Yeah. Now he's like, I don't know.
Now he's like 500. Like, I don't know. That guy he cold plunges every day. So he's clearly
Moses. It's like 800 years old.
He's clearly doing it. I think he's in his 60s. I think he's.
That's what I was going to say. He's probably like twice his age now.
Yeah. I would guess. But yeah, he's been doing it 30 years. Like, I actually think about that a lot because he's a good, whatever you think about Tony Robbins is your place, but he is a good example of like, this is what it could look like if you do coaching for 30 years.
Yeah.
This is what it could look like. I think I would want something very different. And rightfully to my own values, I think that's important. But
although I want us to do a retreat where everyone walks on hot coals or whatever.
We can do that. We'll do that next one. We'll do it in Zion.
Zion.
Yeah, let's go. Hope
you guys are listening.
Yeah. If you're coming to Zion, we have a surprise for you. The idea though of like, I want to go speak to, I want to publish a bestseller. Like, well, hang on, bro. That attempt is way up here versus here. Like, you haven't even written a blog yet. Like, why don't you start with 500 words?
Yeah.
How about a tweet? Like, let's build your way up. And the next level for everyone that says, hey, I want to break through the next level has to have the baby steps.
Yeah. Why is it? Why do you think we do that? Like, think we could just
jump?
Leap. I mean, that is kind of like embedded in American culture though, too.
Well, some of it is valid because you can translate, like you can build yourself up in one way and then translate over, right? If I'm really good at soccer, I can pick up a tennis racket and probably be in the top 70% faster than anybody else because I've had this athletic history.
You're an athlete, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of translation that goes into it. If you're really good at comedy and content that's comedic, you can probably go over and like build an Instagram page really fast comparatively to somebody else. I also think that on the backside, you can't just skip all of it.
Yeah, and we don't always. I'm thinking, how many times have we watched Miss Rachel on that television? Like, how does this woman get to this point? We don't know everything that has gone into
you don't see it
with her life
to
get to that point where she could do that. Oh, they're an overnight sensation. No, they aren't.
Yeah. Shit, Lionel Messi is on record. Like, hey, it took me 20 years. Like, the kid started playing at academy level at 6.
Yep.
Then we're like, oh, he's the Messiah. Like, well, maybe he has a decade more experience than anybody else at 12. Which is crazy to think about, But the idea
we only see like the finished product in this moment.
Right. And I think that is the travesty in the world of personal development is that we don't spend the time. Personal development is a life hack. It is the growth method. It is all those things. We just don't talk about like, hey, this is going to take you 10 years.
Well, and because I'm sure you see it on your social media as well. There's always someone out there that's trying to prey on the person who wants that overnight success.
I'll skip you.
Yeah.
I'll help you skip.
Yeah.
And to some extent, there is truth to that. People can help you skip, right? Go to the expert and he'll skip you through it. Like, there is truth to that.
Yeah.
You still got to try.
Right.
You still have to be prepared to like go out and do it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, they're not going to do it for you.
Right.
In that moment, you're looking more for someone to save you from that situation, from wherever you are, than something else.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a good podcast episode. I think there's a lot of good themes in that. It was really special for me, and much of the things that he specifically references about his way of life and all that.
I'm glad you could get comfortable for this podcast.
Yeah, now that we need to wrap up. The right time. But I will say that I want to do a lot more of those. Like, I want to meet a lot more people like that. I want to do interviews with guys that are like pursuing their art. I think there's really something special about
but
that.
He was also insistent that you speak about the entrepreneurial side of what he does.
Yeah. Yeah. The business
side. Because it was hard for him too.
Nobody, at least not to my knowledge, I'm not hearing a lot. I'm going to totally restate that. I am not hearing a lot of conversations with artists about business. And it's really important because entrepreneurs need to learn that from artists, and artists need to learn the business side from entrepreneurs. Like it's an interplay that's important.
Yeah, because we know from our own work, a lot of the entrepreneurs are very left brain people.
Locked down.
But that other side, that creative side, is such an important piece of the whole thing.
The whole world of entrepreneurship has evolved into like EOS and rocket fuel, kind of like integrator visionary.
Yep.
Visionary is almost always right side of the brain.
Yep.
It's got to be the creative side. What the hell is a visionary if not creative? And if you're stuck in like, well, let's think through it, you're just you're asking.
Welcome to my world.
Hey, the integrator.
But how?
Yeah. Well, I think it was a great conversation.
But at the same time, like even you, the visionary, has an integrator portion where you got to think those. You don't have to rely on someone else fully for that creative side. We all have it. We just don't always know how to tap into it.
It is a really important thing. We should probably do an episode on that and how to navigate that both separately and collectively.
Yeah, because it is necessary. That's bringing the heart piece into it as well.
Yeah.
And we know people who, especially those who have worked in like corporate kind of jobs, have a really hard time with that piece once they're out.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're glad that you tuned in today. Check out the NACO podcast. It's live. You can check it out on Apple Podcasts. You can check it out on Spotify. It's on YouTube if you want to get a visual for it.
I recommend the visual so they could watch him eating his strawberries and see.
Check out his music. You can look up NACO on Spotify, or you can look up NACO and Medicine for the People. Those are the albums that I referenced specifically today, NACO and Medicine for the People. We're glad you're here. We hope that was meaningful.
I just want to say one other thing because I love the name too. NACO is Little Bear is translated, but Medicine for the People I think is just such a great name for his music because that essentially is what it is.
There you have it. So check out their music. Give us a subscribe if you're listening to us, wherever you're listening to us, and we'll see you on the next one. We got some really exciting guests coming up. Marty's been hard at work at finding more and more people, much like NACO, and we're grateful that you're here.
But most exciting is when the two of us are on.
Definitely. Reminder to get out of your own way. We'll see you on the next episode.